Wow! Oh my God! Is this truly me? Maggie whispered, her voice barely audible. In her heart, she knew the answer, but the eyes staring back at her belonged to someone younger, a stranger, a woman she no longer recognized. For just a moment, let me feel what it's like to be loved, she said, clutching the edges of the mirror as if trying to hold onto this new fragile identity. Her heart was racing with excitement and fear, knowing that her secret could be shattered any moment. Would he still look at her with the same affection if he knew the truth? Maggie knew there was no turning back now. In a very small village, surrounded by tall mountains and deep forests, lived Maggie, an elderly woman with a kind but lonely heart. At 80 years old, she had watched countless people around her experience love, companionship, and the warmth of family. Her own life, however, has been one of solitude. Wrinkles covered her face, and her hair was silver, each line and strand a testament to years lived and lost dream. One chilly evening, as she sat by her fireplace, a neighbor came by with exciting news. Maggie, have you heard?" The neighbor exclaimed. Her eyes was wide with excitement. "The prince! Guess what? The prince is looking for a bride. He wants to marry a woman of true heart, someone who will stand by his side with kindness and loyalty." Maggie's heart ached. A prince searching for true love, a fairy tale she had often dreamt about but never thought could be hers. The neighbor noticed Maggie's wistful expression. "Oh, Maggie, don't think about it." "Maggie, the prince is young and handsome. He will choose a young woman. Don't even go there. A beauty fit for the throne." "But isn't it exciting, Maggie?" Maggie forced a smile. "Yeah, exciting," she murmured, though her heart was feeling very heavy. That night, she couldn't sleep. She longed for love, for companionship, but who would want an old woman like her? Suddenly, she remembered tales of a witch who lived deep in the forest, a woman known for her powerful potions. A strange idea took hold of her. What if the witch could make her young again? With a spark of hope, she decided to set out at dawn. At first light, Maggie began her journey, her old bones aching as she walked the winding path through the forest. After hours of traveling, she finally reached the witch's hidden hut. The witch, an ancient woman with piercing green eyes, sat by her coven, stirring something that filled the air with a strange scent. The witch looked up, her gaze sharp. "What brings you here, Maggie?" Maggie hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I want to be young again," she whispered. "I want to look beautiful so that I can win the heart of the prince." The witch's eyes narrowed. "Beauty alone doesn't bring love, Maggie. Many have tried to deceive others with a pretty face, but true love sees beyond that." "I understand," Maggie replied, her voice trembling. "But I'm willing to pay any price to know what it feels like to be loved just once in my life." The witch sighed and handed her a small jar. "Apply this every day. It will make you look younger. But remember, the beauty it brings is only on the outside. True beauty lies within. If you chose this path, it may not end as you hope." Maggie nodded, clutching the jar tightly. "Thank you so much, Ma. I will remember your warning." Back home, Maggie stared at her reflection, her wrinkled face and tired eyes looking back at her. With trembling hands, she opened the jar and applied the thick portion to her skin. Slowly, her wrinkles smoothened, her skin brightened, and her hair turned a rich, dark woman. She gasped as a young, beautiful woman stared back at her from the mirror. The next day, She dressed in a simple clothes and joined the other young women traveling to the place. Her heart pounded with excitement and fear. She blended in, hoping no one would notice her through age hidden behind her flawless face. When she arrived, she saw the prince for the first time. He was so handsome and carried himself with a quiet dignity. Maggie's heart fluttered as she joined the other women, all of whom were vying for his attention. Little did she know, the prince had arranged a series of tests to find the woman with the truest heart. For the first test, the prince placed a small child in the palace garden. The little boy wandered among the flowers, crying as if he was lost. The prince watched from a distance to see how the women would react to the little boy's cry. Some ignored the child, too focused on impressing the prince. Others glanced his way but hesitated, unsure of what to do. Maggie's heart broke at the sight of the child's tears. She knelt beside him, gently wiping his tears. "What's wrong, little one?" she asked softly. "I lost my mother," the boy whispered. Maggie hugged him. "Don't worry, dear. I will help you find her." The prince, watching from afar, smiled. Her actions spoke louder than any words. After the child was safely returned to his mother, he approached Maggie. "You have a gentle heart," he said, his gaze warm. Maggie felt her cheeks flush. "Thank you, Your Highness." As the day wore on, however, she felt a strange tingling on her face. When she went to check her reflection, she noticed a few wrinkles reappearing. Her hand shook as she quickly reapplied the potion. She knew the effects were temporary, but each time they faded, she felt her secrets slipping closer to being exposed. For the second test, the prince arranged a challenge of wisdom. He gathered the women in the grand hall and presented a riddle. "I seek a bride with a sharp mind and wise counsel," he announced. "The women who can solve this riddle will move closer to winning my heart." The riddle was difficult, and many of the women whispered among themselves, struggling to find an answer. Maggie, with her years of experience, thought carefully before responding. "The answer is patience," she said softly, stepping forward. The prince's eyes brightened. "You are correct," he replied, clearly impressed. "You show both kindness and wisdom." Maggie smiled, but her heart was racing. She felt the potion's effect beginning to fade away again. Making an excuse, she slipped away to reapply it, hiding in a corner and hoping no one would notice her vanishing youth. As the days went on, Maggie felt torn. She had come so far, passing the prince's test and capturing his interest, but the guilt of her deception weighed heavily on her heart. Meanwhile, the other women noticed the prince's growing fondness for Maggie and grew envious. One of the young women, Elara, was particularly determined to win the prince's heart. She observed Maggie closely, noticing that she often disappeared and returned looking slightly different. One day, Elara approached Maggie. Her eyes filled with suspicions. "You seem to have the prince's attention, but there is something strange about you." Maggie's heart skipped a bit. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. Elara narrowed her eyes. "You don't look like the others. There is something hidden beneath that face of yours. I'll find out what it is." Feeling panicked, Maggie tried to avoid Elara, but the suspicions planted doubt in her mind. What if the prince found out? Would he still love her if he knew the truth? For the final test, the prince wanted to see honesty in each of the women's heart. He asked them all to share a deep truth about themselves, something they had never told anyone. As the women took turns, they each shared simple secrets, revealing small vulnerabilities without risking too much. When it was Maggie's turn, she froze. She wanted to confess the truth, but fear gripped her heart. Instead, she shared a story from her past that was harmless and kept her true identity hidden. The prince listened, nodding approvingly, but Maggie's guilt weighed heavier than ever. She felt like a fraud, and the look in the prince's eyes as he trusted her only made it worse. Elara, frustrated by her own failure to win the prince's heart, decided to take matters into her own hands. She had noticed Maggie's disappearance and the way her appearance sometimes seemed different. That evening, she followed Maggie to her chambers and watched through a crack in the door as Maggie reapplied the potion. Elara's eyes widened as she realized the truth. Maggie was an old woman hiding behind a mask of youth. Smiling slyly, she knew exactly what she would do next. The next morning, as the women gathered, Elara stepped forward and addressed the prince. "Your Highness, there is something you should know," she said, her voice loud and confident. "One of the women here is not who she appears to be. She had deceived you." The prince looked surprised. "What do you mean?" Elara pointed at Maggie. "She is not young as she appears. She uses a potion to hide her true age. She has lied to you from the start." The other women gasped, and Maggie felt her heart drop. The prince turned to her, his face full of shock and disappointment. "Is this true, Maggie?" Tears filled Maggie's eyes as she nodded, unable to lie any longer. "Yes, Your Highness. It's true," Maggie whispered, her voice trembling. I am not a young woman. I'm 80 years old. I used a potion to make myself appear young, hoping you would love me. I have never been loved, not even for once in my life." The room fell silent as everyone stared at her in shock and disbelief. The prince's face, once warm and kind, was now clouded with hurt. "Why, Maggie?" he asked, his voice filled with sadness. "Why would you deceive me like this?" Maggie looked down, tears streaming down her face. I was lonely, Your Highness. I've lived a long life without love. And when I heard that you were searching for a bride, my heart yearned to know what it felt like to be cherished, to be seen as beautiful." She took a shaky breath, her hands trembling. "But I see now that I was wrong. I thought beauty would win your heart. But I was foolish. True love cannot be built on lies." The prince watched her silently, struggling with his own emotions. "I cared for you, Maggie. Not because of your face, but because of the kindness and wisdom I saw within you. But trust is essential in love, and you have broken that trust." After a long, painful silence, the prince turned to the crowd. "Maggie's deception is difficult to forgive," he said, his voice steady but full of sorrow. "But I believe in second chances. Sometimes, people make mistakes out of pain and fear. If we cast them away, we might miss seeing their true beauty." He looked back at Maggie. "Maggie, I will give you a choice. Leave now, and we shall forget this ever happened. Or stay. Reveal your true self to everyone here, and let us see who you truly are. I will make my decisions only after knowing the real you." Maggie's heart raced. She knew that staying meant facing humiliation, but she also knew that she had to show her true self if she wanted a chance at forgiveness. With a shaky nod, she agreed. Slowly, Maggie lifted her trembling hands to her face and wiped away the remnants of the potion. Her young, flawless skin faded, revealing the deep wrinkles, gray hair, and weary eyes that spoke of her long life. Gasp filled the room as the crowd saw her transformation. The young women stared in shock, and Elara smirked satisfied with Maggie's disgrace. But Maggie stood tall, her head held high, and for the first time she felt free. She looked at the prince with honesty and vulnerability. This is who I am, Your Highness," she said softly. "An old woman with a lifetime of stories, mistakes, and dreams. I hid behind a mask, but I understand now that love is not about hiding. It's about showing who we truly are, flaws and everything. The prince looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of compassion and sorrow. He had been hurt by her lie, but he could see the courage it took for her to reveal her true self. The prince took a step forward, addressing the crowd. Beauty fades, but character remains. Maggie may have hidden her age, but she did not hide her kindness, her wisdom, or her strength. He looked back at Maggie, his gaze softening. Though your deception wounded me, I see now that it was born from a longing for love, a longing many of us share. The crowd murmured in surprise, unsure of what to make of the prince's word. But the prince continued undeterred. Maggie, I believe true beauty lies within your act with a mistake, but your heart remains true. I'm willing to forgive, but only if we begin anew, with honesty and trust. Maggie's heart swelled, her tears of sorrow turning into tears of gratitude. She nodded, overwhelmed by his compassion. Thank you, Your Highness. I promise I will never hide my true self again. As the prince took Maggie's hand, Elara stepped forward, her face red with anger and jealousy. How can you forgive her? She demanded. She lied to you. She is old, weak, and not fit to be a queen. The prince turned to Elara, his expression calm but stern. Elara, you speak of weakness, but true weakness lies in cruelty and envy. Maggie may be old, but she has shown strength and courage by revealing her true self. Elara opened her mouth to argue, but the prince's words struck her deeply. She realized that her jealousy had turned her heart bitter, blinded her to her own flaws. She lowered her gaze, suddenly ashamed of her actions. Maggie, noticing Elara's regret, stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We all make mistakes, Elara. Perhaps this is a lesson for both of us. Elara looked at her, surprised by her kindness. I'm truly sorry, Maggie. I was jealous. I wanted the prince's love, but I see now that love is about more than appearances. Maggie smiled softly. It's never too late to learn, Elara. Over the coming days, the prince spent time with Maggie, getting to know the real woman beneath the mask. He listened to her story, each one revealing a lifetime of wisdom, laughter, and lust. He found himself drawn to her even more, not because of her appearance, but because of the depth of her character. Maggie too felt a transformation within herself. She no longer felt the need to hide behind beauty. She embraced her age, her wrinkles, and the lessons she had learned over the years. She realized that true beauty was in the courage to be oneself, without fear or judgment. The prince grew to love her deeply, not as a young woman, but as the remarkable person she truly was. After a time, the prince asked Maggie to marry him. This time, knowing her fully and truly, she accepted, and they wedded in a ceremony that celebrated not just love, but honesty, acceptance, and redemption. The people of the kingdom, at first surprised, came to understand the depth of the prince's choice. Maggie became known as the Queen of the Heart, and her story spread throughout the land, inspiring others to see beauty in honesty, kindness, and character. Even Elara changed, choosing to learn from Maggie's example. She became a close friend and advisor to the queen, grateful for the lesson she had learned. Years later, Maggie and the prince sat together, watching the sunset from their palace balcony. Maggie, now even older, with silver hair and deep wrinkles, looked at her husband with a heart full of love. The prince took her hand, smiling. Maggie, I see more beauty in you now than I ever did when I first met you. Maggie laughed softly. And I see now that I didn't need a potion to find love. I just needed the courage to be myself. They sat in silence, their hands intertwined, each grateful for the journey that had brought them together. Maggie had finally found the love she had longed for, not because she hid her age, but because she learned to embrace it. Maggie's story became a tale passed down through generations, teaching people of all ages that true beauty is not in youth or flawless skin, but in the courage to be honest and kind. Her life showed that love built on truth is stronger than any mask, and that real beauty lies in the heart. As the people remembered her story, they were reminded never to judge a person by their appearance, for beauty fades, but kindness, wisdom, and love endure forever. Maggie's story teaches us that real beauty goes beyond appearances. It lies in honesty, kindness, and the strength to be ourselves. What would you have done in Maggie's place? Would you have forgiven her as the prince did? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. Remember, true beauty shines from within. Till I see you again in my next story. Goodbye.